Life has a funny way of changing when you least expect it. You wake up one morning thinking it's just another ordinary day, and then something happens that shifts everything. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday morning that started like every other Tuesday before it. I'd been working at this downtown coffee shop for about 3 years. It wasn't my dream job or anything, but it paid the bills and kept me busy. After my marriage fell apart, I needed that. I needed routine. I needed something predictable where I could just show up, do my work, and not think too much about everything that went wrong in my personal life. Every morning was the same. Wake up at 6, shower, grab a quick breakfast, and walk the 15 minutes to the shop. I'd unlock the doors at 7 sharp, start brewing the first pots of coffee, and prepare for the morning rush. The same customers would come in at the same times. The guy in the suit always ordered a double espresso at 7:15. The college student wanted her caramel latte at 7:30. The retired teacher came in at 8 for his decaf and newspaper. I liked the predictability. After the chaos of my divorce 2 years earlier, predictable felt safe. My ex-wife had told me I was boring, that I never took risks, that living with me was like watching paint dry. Those words stuck with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was boring, but at least boring didn't hurt. That Tuesday morning started normal enough. The usual crowd filtered through. I made their drinks, called out their names, cleaned the counters, restocked the pastries. My coworker Jamie was handling the register while I worked the espresso machine. We had our rhythm down perfectly after working together for over a year. Then she walked in. I noticed her immediately, which was strange because I rarely paid attention to new customers anymore. They all kind of blended together after a while. But she was different somehow. Not because she was dressed fancy or anything. Actually, she looked pretty casual. Worn jeans with paint stains on them, an oversized flannel shirt that had seen better days, dark hair pulled back in a messy bun like she just twisted it up without looking in a mirror. She walked up to the counter, and when Jamie asked what she wanted, she just smiled and said black coffee. Nothing fancy. No special request. Just simple black coffee. Jamie rang her up and I poured her drink into a to-go cup. When I handed it to her, our hands touched for just a second. Nothing dramatic. Just that brief contact when you're passing something to someone. But I felt it. This little spark of something I couldn't name. She thanked me, took her coffee, and instead of leaving like most to-go customers do, she walked over to the corner of the shop where there was this exposed brick wall. We had a few small tables scattered around, but she didn't sit at any of them. She just leaned against that wall, set her bag down on the floor, pulled out a sketchbook, and started drawing. That's when I noticed she was watching me. Not in a creepy way, not like she was staring or being weird about it. But every time I'd look up from making drinks, I'd catch her glancing at me. Our eyes would meet for a split second, and she'd give this small smile before looking back down at her sketchbook. Then a minute later, I'd feel her eyes on me again. It threw me off completely. I started messing up orders I could make in my sleep. I put whole milk in a drink that was supposed to be oat milk. I forgot to add the extra shot of espresso someone asked for. I called out the wrong name twice. Jamie noticed right away. "What's going on with you?" she whispered during a brief lull between customers. "You're all over the place this morning." I didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell someone that a stranger leaning against a wall and sketching is completely disrupting your concentration? It sounded ridiculous even in my own head. "Just tired," I lied. Jamie glanced over at the woman by the wall, then back at me and grinned. "Right. Tired, sure." The morning rush eventually slowed down. By 9:30, most of the early crowd had cleared out. The woman was still there, still leaning against that brick wall, still drawing in her sketchbook. I busied myself wiping down the espresso machine, organizing the cups, doing anything to look occupied. Then I felt her walking up to the counter. My heart started beating faster, which was stupid. I was 32 years old, not some teenager with a crush. But there was something about her that made me nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Hey," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "I'm about to head out, but I wanted to leave this for you." She slid a napkin across the counter toward me. I looked down and saw she'd drawn on it. It was a sketch of me behind the counter pouring coffee. Just a few simple lines, but somehow she'd captured the moment perfectly. The way I held the picture, the concentration on my face, even the little crease between my eyebrows I get when I'm focusing. "This is really good," I said, genuinely impressed. "You're talented." She smiled. and I noticed she had this way of smiling where just one corner of her mouth lifted higher than the other. Thanks, I'm an illustrator, so I spend a lot of time sketching people. You have interesting features. Good bone structure. You're easy to draw. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever told me I had good bone structure before. It felt like a compliment, but also just a factual observation from an artist's perspective. Well, thank you, I managed. For the drawing, I mean. You're welcome, she said. She picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and headed toward the door. Right before she left, she turned back and waved. Not a big dramatic wave, just a small gesture with her fingers. Then she was gone. I stood there holding that napkin, staring at the sketch, feeling like something had just happened but not quite sure what. Jamie came up beside me and looked at the drawing. Okay, that's actually really cool, she admitted. Did you get her name? I realized I hadn't. This woman had spent over 2 hours in our coffee shop watching me, drawing me, leaving me this sketch, and I didn't even know her name. I felt like I'd missed an opportunity, though I wasn't sure what kind of opportunity. The rest of the day felt different. I kept looking at that napkin during my breaks. I'd tucked it carefully into my apron pocket, not wanting to crumple or smudge it. Every time the door opened, I found myself hoping it might be her coming back. It never was. When my shift ended at 6, I took the napkin home with me. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. It wasn't much, just a basic place with bare white walls and minimal furniture. After the divorce, I'd sold most of our stuff and started over with just the essentials. I hadn't bothered to decorate or make it feel like home. It was just a place to sleep. But that night I took that napkin sketch and pinned it to my refrigerator with a magnet. It was the first piece of art I'd put up since moving in. Looking at it made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. The sense that maybe my boring, predictable life could still surprise me. I went to bed that night wondering if I'd ever see her again, and hoping that maybe, just maybe, I would. Wednesday morning I woke up earlier than usual. I told myself it was just because I'd slept well, but deep down I knew the truth. I was hoping she'd come back to the coffee shop. I got ready faster than normal, skipped my usual breakfast routine, and arrived at work 15 minutes early. Jamie raised an eyebrow when I walked in. Someone's eager today. Just couldn't sleep, I said, which was partly true. I'd actually been awake since 5, lying in bed thinking about that sketch on my refrigerator. I went through my opening routine, but my mind kept wandering. What if she didn't come back? What if yesterday was just a one-time thing? Maybe she'd just been in the neighborhood and wouldn't have any reason to return. I felt disappointed before the day even started, which seemed ridiculous. The morning rush began right on schedule. Same faces, same orders, same rhythm. But I kept watching the door. Every time it opened, I'd look up expecting to see her. Each time it wasn't, I felt a little let down. Then around 8:15, she walked in. I felt my stomach do this weird flip. She was wearing different clothes, dark jeans, and a cream-colored sweater. But she had the same messy bun and carried the same worn bag. She came straight to the counter, and this time when she smiled at me, it felt like we were sharing a secret. Black coffee? I asked, trying to sound casual. You remembered, she said, looking pleased. Of course I remembered. I'd thought about little else since yesterday, but I just shrugged like it was no big deal. It's kind of my job to remember orders. She paid, took her coffee, and headed straight to the same spot by the brick wall. She pulled out her sketchbook, settled against the wall with one knee bent, and started drawing. And just like yesterday, I could feel her watching me between sketches. This became our pattern. Every single day that week, she came in around the same time, ordered the same drink, and claimed the same spot against that wall. We didn't really talk much beyond the basic transaction at the counter. But there was this awareness between us, this unspoken connection that grew stronger each day. By Friday, Jamie had had enough of watching me trying not to watch her. During my break, Jamie practically pushed me toward the corner of the shop. Go talk to her. You're driving me crazy with all this longing staring. I'm not staring, I protested weakly. You absolutely are. Both of you. It's like watching two people in a silent movie. Just go introduce yourself properly. My hands felt sweaty as I walked over to where she sat. She looked up from her sketchbook as I approached, and that half-smile appeared on her face again. Mind if I sit? I asked, gesturing to the empty floor space beside her. Please do, she said, shifting her bag to make room. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor next to her. It felt strange being a customer in my own workplace, sitting on the floor during my break, but it also felt right somehow. "I'm Daniel," I said, finally introducing myself after a week of silent exchanges. "Elena," she replied, "though I guess I should have introduced myself before spending 5 days drawing you." I laughed. "You've been drawing me all week?" She flipped through her sketchbook, showing me page after page of sketches. Me making coffee, me talking to customers, me wiping down the counter, me looking out the window during a quiet moment. Some were quick gesture drawings, just a few lines. Others were more detailed studies. "This might seem weird," she said, "but I'm working on a graphic novel about ordinary moments. About how the everyday things people do can be beautiful if you really look at them. You're very present when you work. Most people are just going through the motions, but you really focus on what you're doing. It's interesting to watch." No one had ever called me interesting before. My ex-wife had used words like boring, predictable, dull. Hearing Elena say I was interesting to watch felt like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. We talked for the rest of my 15-minute break. She told me she was a freelance illustrator, that she'd been working on this graphic novel project for almost a year, that she'd recently moved to the city and was still finding her favorite spots. I told her about working at the coffee shop, though I left out the parts about my divorce and how I'd been hiding from life for 2 years. When my break ended, I didn't want to go back to work. I wanted to sit there on that floor and keep talking to her. But I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and reluctantly returned to the counter. For the rest of my shift, I was hyper-aware of her presence, and this time, when our eyes met across the shop, we both smiled openly instead of looking away. The next week, our conversations got longer. She started taking her breaks at the same time as mine. We'd sit together by that brick wall, and she'd show me what she was working on. I learned that she'd grown up moving between different foster homes. That art had been her escape and her therapy, that she'd taught herself to draw by copying comic books and studying people in public places. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about in years. Not the heavy stuff yet, but little things. How I'd always wanted to open my own coffee shop someday but was too afraid to take the risk. How I missed the creative dreams I'd had when I was younger before life got in the way. How sometimes I felt like I was just going through the motions of living rather than actually living. Elena listened in this intense way, like every word mattered. She didn't interrupt or offer quick solutions. She just listened and asked questions that made me think deeper about my own life. "Why don't you do it?" she asked one day when I mentioned the coffee shop dream. "Open your own place?" "It's complicated," I said, which was my default answer for anything that required real risk or change. "Most good things are," she replied simply. My coworker David, who worked the afternoon shifts, started teasing me about having a girlfriend. "She's not my girlfriend," I'd insist. "We're just friends." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't quite true. We were becoming something more than friends, even though neither of us had acknowledged it. There was this pull between us, this gravitational force that made me count down the hours until her daily visit. I'd started getting to work even earlier, just to make sure everything was perfect before she arrived. I'd make her coffee with extra care, making sure the temperature was exactly right. Jamie noticed the change in me. "You seem happier," she observed one morning. "Like you've woken up after a long sleep." Maybe I had been asleep. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking through life since my divorce, just existing rather than living. Elena was waking me up, reminding me that life could still hold surprises, still offer new connections, still feel exciting. But I was also scared. The last time I'd let someone in, it had ended with me broken and questioning everything about myself. I wasn't sure I was ready to risk that kind of pain again, so I kept things friendly but maintained a careful distance, even though every instinct told me to get closer. October arrived with cooler weather and changing leaves. Elena had been coming to the coffee shop every day for over a month now. Our conversations had become the highlight of my day. She'd tell me about her latest illustration projects, and I'd share stories about the regulars and their quirks. We'd laugh together, sometimes so hard that other customers would look over at us curiously. But something was shifting. The comfortable friendship we'd built was becoming something else, something I wasn't ready to name. I could feel it in the way my heart sped up when she walked through the door, in the way I'd catch myself thinking about her during my time off, in the way her absence on the rare days she didn't come felt like something vital was missing. One afternoon, Elena showed up with her sketchbook as usual, but this time she seemed different. A little nervous, maybe. She ordered her coffee, but instead of heading to her usual spot by the wall, she waited at the counter until my break. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. My stomach tightened. Those 3 words rarely led anywhere good. We sat down at a table in the corner, more private than our usual spot by the wall. Elena opened her sketchbook, but instead of showing me drawings of the coffee shop or random people, she turned to pages filled entirely with sketches of me. Pages and pages of them. Different angles, different expressions, different moments. Some were detailed portraits that must have taken hours. Others were quick studies capturing a gesture or movement. It was like seeing myself through her eyes, and what I saw surprised me. The person in those drawings looked thoughtful, kind, interesting. Nothing like the boring man my ex-wife had described. "I've been wanting to show you these," Elena said softly, "but I wasn't sure how you'd react. The thing is, Daniel, I don't just draw people randomly anymore. I draw people who inspire me, people who make me feel something." The air between us felt charged suddenly. I knew what she was saying without her having to spell it out completely. And part of me wanted to reach across that table and take her hand, tell her I felt the same way. But the other part, the scared part that still remembered the pain of my failed marriage, pulled back. "Elena," I started, not sure what I was going to say. "You don't have to say anything," she interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know. I'm not expecting anything. I just thought honesty was important," but I could see the hope in her eyes. And the fear. She was taking a risk, putting herself out there, and I was about to let her down because I was too afraid to risk getting hurt again. I felt like a coward. "These are beautiful," I said, gesturing to the drawings. "You're incredibly talented. And I'm flattered, really. But I'm not in a place where I can—" I trailed off, not knowing how to finish that sentence. "Not in a place where I can what? Be happy, take a chance? Let someone care about me?" Elena nodded slowly, closing her sketchbook. "I understand," she said, though I could hear the disappointment in her voice. "We can just be friends." That's totally fine, but it wasn't fine. I could feel the shift immediately. The easy comfort between us had been replaced by this awkward tension. When my break ended and I went back to work, Elena packed up her things and left earlier than usual. She still smiled and waved goodbye, but it wasn't the same. Over the next couple of weeks, Elena still came to the coffee shop, but everything had changed. She'd arrive, get her coffee, and sit by her wall with her sketchbook. But now she was drawing other things, other people. She wasn't watching me anymore. Our conversations became shorter, more polite and distant. The connection we'd built felt like it was slipping away, and I had no one to blame but myself. Jamie finally confronted me after watching me mess up yet another order while stealing glances at Elena. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded during a slow period. "You and Elena barely talk anymore. Did something happen?" I told her everything. About the drawings, about Elena's admission, about my refusal to let things go further. Jamie listened quietly, then looked at me like I was the biggest fool she'd ever met. "So let me get this straight," she said slowly. "A beautiful, talented woman who actually gets you and makes you happy basically told you she has feelings for you, and you said no because you're scared." "It's more complicated than that," I protested. "No, it really isn't," Jamie shot back. "Look, I get that your divorce was rough. We've worked together long enough that I know you've been hurt. But Daniel, you can't let one bad experience stop you from taking chances. Elena is not your ex-wife. She's been nothing but genuine and kind to you for months. And you're throwing that away because you're afraid." Her words hit hard because they were true. I was letting fear control my decisions. I was so busy protecting myself from potential pain that I was guaranteeing current misery. Every day I watched Elena sit alone by that wall, no longer watching me, no longer sharing her drawings, no longer lighting up when our eyes met. Felt worse than any risk could be. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd lost with my ex-wife and everything I stood to lose with Elena. My marriage had failed because we'd grown apart, because we wanted different things, because we'd stopped really seeing each other. But Elena saw me, really saw me. She noticed details about me that I didn't even notice about myself. She found beauty in ordinary moments, including moments with me in them. I thought about how my ex-wife had called me boring, and how Elena had called me interesting. How my ex-wife had made me feel small, and how Elena made me feel seen. How my ex-wife had taken and taken until I was empty, and how Elena gave freely without asking for anything in return until she finally, bravely, honestly told me how she felt. By 3 in the morning, I'd made a decision. I was tired of being afraid. I was tired of playing it safe. I was tired of letting my past dictate my future. If I was going to lose Elena, at least let it be because I tried, not because I was too scared to even take a chance. The next morning, I got to work an hour early. I was nervous, my hands shaking slightly as I prepped the coffee shop for opening. I had no idea what I was going to say to Elena when she came in. I just knew I had to say something. 8:15 came and went. Elena didn't show up. My heart sank. Had I already lost my chance? Had she decided to stop coming altogether? Then at 8:45 the door opened and she walked in. She looked tired, like maybe she hadn't been sleeping well either. She came to the counter and before she could order, I spoke up. "Elena, can we talk? Please?" She looked surprised but nodded. I asked Jamie to cover for me, then led Elena outside to the small patio area beside the coffee shop. The morning air was cool and I could see my breath as I tried to figure out how to put my feelings into words. "I'm sorry," I started. "I'm sorry for pulling away. I'm sorry for letting fear make my decisions. The truth is you scare me, not because of anything you've done but because of how you make me feel." Elena looked at me with those thoughtful eyes, waiting for me to continue. I could see the uncertainty there, the guardedness that hadn't been present before I'd hurt her by pushing her away. I'd put that wall up between us, and now I had to find a way to tear it down. "You make me feel alive again," I continued, the words coming faster now. "For 2 years I've been going through the motions, keeping my head down, not letting anyone get close. And then you walked into the coffee shop and just, I don't know, saw me in a way no one has in a long time, maybe ever. Daniel," she said softly, but I needed to finish. "Let me say this, please. I've been so afraid of getting hurt again that I was willing to hurt both of us by pushing you away. But these past couple weeks, watching you sit there and not looking at me, not sharing your drawings, not talking to me the way we used to, that's hurt more than any risk ever could." A small smile started to form on her face. "Really? Really? I miss you. I miss us, whatever we were becoming. And I know I don't deserve another chance after being such a coward, but if you're willing, I'd really like to take you to dinner. An actual date, not just talking during my coffee break." Elena was quiet for a moment and my heart was pounding so hard I thought she must be able to hear it. Then she reached out and took my hand, her fingers cold from the morning air but her touch warm nonetheless. "I'd like that," she said simply. "I'd like that a lot." The relief that washed over me was physical. I'd been holding tension in my shoulders for weeks without even realizing it. "Yeah? Yeah, though I have to admit I've missed our coffee break talks too. Are those included in this new arrangement?" "Absolutely. Those are non-negotiable." We went on our first official date that weekend. I took her to a small Italian restaurant downtown. Nothing too fancy but cozy and intimate. Without the backdrop of the coffee shop and the pressure of my work schedule, our conversation flowed even more naturally. Elena told me more about her childhood, about the struggles of moving between foster homes, never quite belonging anywhere. Art was the only constant, she explained, over pasta and wine. No matter where I was placed, I could draw. I could create my own world when the real one didn't feel safe. I shared more about my marriage and its failure, how I'd felt inadequate, like I was never quite enough, how my ex-wife's words had made me doubt everything about myself. It felt vulnerable and scary to share these things, but Elena listened without judgment. "You know what I think?" she said when I finished. "I think she couldn't appreciate what she had. You're thoughtful and kind and present. You actually pay attention to people. Do you know how rare that is?" Her words felt like healing something broken inside me. We stayed at that restaurant until they started stacking chairs on tables around us, lost in conversation and in each other. The next few months were like discovering color after years of living in grayscale. Elena still came to the coffee shop every day, but now she'd wait until my shift ended and we'd walk home together, taking the long way through the park, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. She showed me parts of the city I'd never explored despite living there for years. We'd find little art galleries and independent bookstores, spend Sunday mornings at farmers markets and stay up late watching old movies on her worn-out couch. My apartment started to change too. Elena would bring over her artwork and slowly my bare white walls filled with color and life. She taught me that a home should reflect the people living in it, should tell a story. My space was finally starting to feel like it belonged to me, not just to the ghost of my failed marriage. but it wasn't all smooth. There were moments when my old fears would creep back in, times when Elena would say something sweet or make plans for the future, and I'd feel panic rising in my chest. What if I wasn't enough? What if this ended badly too? What if I was setting myself up for another fall? One evening, about 4 months into our relationship, Elena noticed me pulling away again. We'd been planning a weekend trip together, and I'd suddenly gotten quiet and distant. She called me out on it directly. "What's going on in your head?" she asked, sitting across from me on her couch. "I can see you retreating." I tried to deny it at first, but Elena wasn't having it. "Talk to me, Daniel. We can't build something real if you won't let me in." So I told her about the fear that lived in my chest, the voice that whispered I wasn't good enough, that this couldn't last, that I should protect myself before it was too late. It felt embarrassing to admit, like I was being weak or needy, but Elena didn't make me feel weak. She moved closer, taking my hands in hers. "I can't promise this will be easy," she said honestly. "I can't promise we won't hurt each other sometimes or that we'll never fight or have doubts. But I can promise that I see you, the real you, and I choose that person, flaws and fears and all. Even when I'm being ridiculous and pushing you away, even then. Though I'd prefer if you'd talk to me instead of disappearing into your head. Deal, deal." We made an agreement that night. When fear showed up, when doubts crept in, we'd talk about them instead of letting them fester. It wasn't always easy. There were conversations that felt awkward and vulnerable, times when I wanted to shut down instead of opening up. But Elena was patient, and slowly I learned that vulnerability didn't make me weak. It made our connection stronger. By December, I'd met her friends and she'd met mine. David, my coworker who'd warned me about getting in too deep too fast, had become one of her biggest supporters after meeting her. "I was wrong," he'd admitted over drinks one night. "She's good for you. You're different now. Better." Jamie had been thrilled from the start. "I knew it," she kept saying. "I knew you two were meant to happen. I should be a matchmaker." Elena and I started talking about bigger things. Not marriage, neither of us was ready for that kind of step yet, but about our dreams and goals, about what we wanted our lives to look like. She was finishing her graphic novel and had interest from a small publisher. I'd started seriously researching what it would take to open my own coffee shop, something I'd only fantasized about before. "What if we did it together?" Elena suggested one night. "Your coffee shop could feature local artists, rotating displays every month. A space where art and community come together." The idea excited me more than I wanted to admit, but it also terrified me. It was such a big risk, such a huge step away from the safety of my regular paycheck and predictable routine. "Think about it," Elena said, seeing my hesitation. "I'm not saying we have to decide now. Just don't let fear make all your decisions." Those words stayed with me. Don't let fear make all your decisions. It had become my pattern, my default response to anything uncertain. But where had that gotten me? 2 years of sleepwalking through life, playing it safe and feeling half alive. Maybe it was time for a different approach. Maybe it was time to choose possibility over safety, growth over comfort, hope over fear. Winter came early that year. By late December, snow had already covered the city twice, and the coffee shop stayed busy with people seeking warmth and caffeine. The holiday season always brought this weird mixture of joy and loneliness. Families gathering, couples shopping together, while people like me who'd been through divorce felt the ache of what used to be. But this year was different. This year I had Elena. Christmas Eve fell on a Saturday, and I'd finally gotten the day off after working the holiday for the past 2 years. Elena and I had planned to spend it together, just a quiet day at her place watching movies and cooking dinner. But I'd been secretly planning something else. 3 weeks earlier, I'd contacted a real estate agent about that commercial space I'd been watching for months. It was a corner spot with huge windows, exposed brick walls, and enough room for tables, a coffee bar, and display space for artwork. Every time I walked past it, I imagined what it could become. But imagination felt safe. Actually pursuing it felt terrifying. Elena had noticed my distraction. "You're plotting something," she'd said a few days before Christmas. "You get this look on your face when you're thinking hard about something." "Just work stuff," I'd lied, which earned me a skeptical look. She knew me too well by now. On Christmas Eve morning, I picked Elena up early. "We're taking a little detour before we head to your place," I said mysteriously. "Should I be worried?" she asked, but she was smiling. I drove us downtown to the commercial space. The real estate agent had agreed to meet us there, giving me access for an hour. The space was empty, cold, and honestly kind of depressing in its bare state, but I could see its potential. Elena looked confused as I unlocked the door and let her inside.
Daniel, what is this? This, I said, my breath visible in the cold air, is the space I've been looking at.
For the coffee shop I've been dreaming about for years but was too scared to actually pursue. Her eyes widened as she looked around, and I could see her artistic mind already envisioning possibilities. She walked to the brick wall, running her hand along it, then moved to the windows where morning light was streaming in. "This is perfect," she breathed. "Daniel, this is absolutely perfect. How did you? I've been meeting with the real estate agent, talking to banks about loans, working on a business plan. It's terrifying and probably crazy, but I think I want to do this, and I was hoping if you're interested you might want to be part of it." Elena turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "Part of it how?" This was the moment I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. As a partner, not just in the business but in building something together, your art would be integral to the whole concept. Monthly rotating displays featuring local artists. Maybe workshops and events, a community space that's about more than just coffee. "That's a huge commitment," she said slowly. "Are you sure you want to tie yourself to me in that way? Mixing business and relationship?" I walked over to where she stood by the window. "I've spent 2 years playing it safe, avoiding risks, protecting myself from potential pain. And you know what? I was miserable. These past few months with you have reminded me what it feels like to actually live. So yes, maybe it's risky, maybe it could get complicated, but I'd rather take that risk with you than play it safe alone." Elena's eyes were shining, and I realized she was holding back tears. "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious. I'm all in, Elena. With the coffee shop, with us, with building a life that's about more than just surviving, if you'll have me." She kissed me then, right there in that cold, empty space that would become our dream. When we finally pulled apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. Though I have so many ideas already. Can we knock out this wall? And what about the lighting? We'd need proper gallery lighting for the artwork. And the layout should flow in a way that encourages people to look at the art while they wait for their coffee." I laughed, relief and joy washing over me. "We have time to figure all that out." We spent the next hour walking through the space, Elena sketching quick floor plans and design ideas, while I took notes and measurements. By the time we left, we had the rough outline of a vision. It would take months of work, probably longer than we anticipated. There would be permits and renovations and a million details to figure out. But for the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about the future. The actual process of opening the coffee shop was harder than either of us expected. There were days when nothing went according to plan. Contractors who didn't show up. Permits that took forever to process. Budget over.